2021, and we are here today for a virtual hearing on Docket 0216, an ordinance to establish guidelines for permitting retail residential kitchens. This matter was sponsored by Councilor Julia Mejia and was referred to the committee on January 27, 2021. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12th executive order, we're having this hearing on Zoom to balance our ability to do our jobs, but also with the public safety at this moment during the pandemic. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8 RCN 82 Verizon 964. It will be rebroadcasted at a later date. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all councilors. Quick summary of the ordinance. This ordinance will amend the City of Boston Code by allowing for retail residential kitchen permits to prepare cottage foods. Operators of retail residential kitchens would be required to comply with state sanitary code and would be subject to annual inspections by the Health Division of the city's Inspectional Services Department. Applicants for these permits would be required to obtain all necessary permits and regulatory approvals, including approvals from the ZBA, or Zoning Board of Appeal. Participating today, we have Natalia Utube, Director of Small Business in the City of Boston. And for everyone, please, if I accidentally mispronounce your name, just simply let me know, or when we call on you, please correct me, and I do apologize in advance. Andre Entezari, who is an advocate for the residential kitchens. We have Irene Nakabonj Lugundi, a founder of Mani Juices, and Manisha Sethi, who is a technology engineer for Indelish. Yeah, okay. The committee also received emails, actually a majority of the emails supporting this ordinance, or at least excited about the conversation, I will say. So before I turn it over to Julia Mejia for opening remarks, I'm just going to announce who has also joined us today in terms of my colleagues. In order of arrival, we have Councilor Flynn, Councilor Braden, Councilor Bach, and Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Mejia, when you're ready, feel free to do opening remarks and just letting people know how this will go. We'll have opening remarks from our colleagues. Then I'm going to actually have all of the panelists that I just announced go ahead and speak. Then I will check to see if there's anyone signed up for public testimony, allow some public to speak. And then we'll have a round with the councilors, which usually involves our questions and concerns or whatever comes to mind. And the lead sponsor will kick that off as well. So to the lead sponsor, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you to the chair for holding this hearing. As the chair of the Committee of Small Business and Workforce Development, our office is committed to finding new ways for people to be able to start a business and earn capital. We've spoken to dozens of entrepreneurs across the city, and while owning a brick and mortar storefront is the dream of many, financially it's not an option that's available to many. This was an issue before the pandemic, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. That is why we're so lucky to have entrepreneurs and advocates like Andre, who approached our office looking to create systems that would allow for residential retail kitchens, which is the type of food operation that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts allows for, that allows people to prepare and sell certain types of food in their home. These certain types of foods, called cottage foods, are products that must be shelf stable, such as jams, baked goods, jerkies, etc. While in the future, we hope to find ways to expand the list of what foods you can make in your home, for now, we're simply implementing a law that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has written it. Our ordinance does two main things. First, it creates the permitting process for at-home entrepreneurs who are interested in applying for a permit. We have been working closely with ISD, the Department of Small Business Development, to make sure this process is easy and affordable. Second, this ordinance outlines ways which the city can ensure what the products and the employees of the residential kitchens will follow all health code standards. We have had the pleasure of working alongside community active advocates and members of the mayor's administration on this. We look forward to holding this hearing and the following working sessions and passing something soon so that entrepreneurs across the city can begin to take advantage of retail residential kitchens. And I also would like to thank my colleagues who have joined us in the administration and the advocates that are going to be on the panel today. And thank you, Chairwoman Councillor Edwards, for always breaking it all down for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And complete oversight, I apologize. We also have with us Commissioner Jack Dempsey and also Fire Marshal Brian Pulley. Who will, would you guys, would you like to be part of the formal panel, or are you just here for questions? It's up to you.
We could just ask a couple of questions if you don't mind when we get there. So it's not a big deal. Thank you for having us be part of this. Important that we are part of this conversation. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So when we get to the round of questions, we'll just include you as part of the order. Perfect. So, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Mejia, to the panelists and City Council staff, Central staff as well. Councillor Edwards, I have no opening statement. I just want to, again, I know you did, but I want to acknowledge the Fire Commissioner and the men and women of the Fire Department for their extraordinary work in our city. Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Councillor Braden.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I don't have any opening statement at this point. I just want to thank everyone for bringing this issue forward, especially Andre, who spoke with us. I think we were about to evacuate from City Hall last year when he brought this issue to our attention. I'm really delighted to see that it's moving forward with the support of Councillor Mejia, and I look forward to the conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also want to thank all the city agencies, ISD, Fire, Small Business for being on today. Thank Councillor Mejia for bringing this forward, and all the advocates and small proprietors. I think, this is sort of the like in the weeds, nuts and bolts of city government, right? It's like, how do we make things work better for for the people in the city, for our small proprietors, especially in a lot of our communities of color, and also at the same time protect consumers and keep the city safe. Like that's exactly the kind of balancing act that we're always supposed to be up to here. So although we're in Zoom, not in City Hall, it feels like a very appropriate way to start the week. And I certainly feel, I think I've said this before when we talked about this last year, but there was historically in sort of our zoning codes, well, actually prior to our zoning codes in our cities, much more intermingling of kind of commercial and residential uses. And that was a strong tradition of our immigrant communities back 100 years ago. And in some cases, unfortunately, sort of excluding those uses from neighborhoods and saying they're all residential was part of it was part of trying to, segregate city spaces. And so I think thinking about, how do we embrace this immigrant nature of the city? How do we have these uses mixed in together? And then at the same time, make sure that we're keeping all the health and sanitary and safety codes that we need to. It's a great project. So thank you, Councillor Mejia, and thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so second verse will be better than the first. I forgot a lot of people who are here to testify, and I truly apologize. I had half my notes. So I'm going to go through the whole list again. These are mostly the folks, our hardworking folks from the city. Again, we have Commissioner John Dempsey, Chief Tully from the Fire Department, Dion Irish, Commissioner from Inspectional Services Department, Chris English, who's the Chief of Staff from ISD, Dan Prendergast. I don't have a department. Is that ISD as well, Dan? ISD. And then, of course, Natalia Ortube from the Director of Small Business. And I had already announced the advocates, but I'll just do it again. Andre Entezari, who is an advocate for this. Irene Nakabonj Lugundi, founder of Mani Juices. And Manisha Sethi, technology engineer from Indalesh. My extreme apologies to everyone. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No immediate questions. Great to see, obviously, our Commissioner, Commissioner Dempsey, Commissioner Irish with respect to life safety and sanitation, et cetera. And obviously, Natalia doing great work on behalf of our small businesses. So look forward to the hearing and the discussion, and I'll weigh in at the appropriate time.
Thank
you,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to have this conversation. This is, again, for folks to know, this is about an ordinance. So we're going to be very specific about the ordinance and what it can or can't do and the implications of the overall concept. So I'll just go ahead and get my outside of this topic, but part of the theme thoughts out there. I'm excited for this conversation. I have certain concerns, and I'm sure the advocates will explain to us how you can keep and monitor the sanitation of product in people's private homes. I am concerned, or at least would want to know, how does this impact the landlord-tenant relationship if they're becoming a commercial entity in an apartment, in a triple decker, for example. I'm curious about that. I'm curious if the landlord needs to be notified, if that would impact their insurance at all. I say that as a landlord, and I have a triple decker, so I'm curious. I'm not opposed to it. I just tell me practically how that works. I'm also curious, and then would love to hear at maybe another hearing, Councilor Mejia, how we could talk about expanding economic opportunity with the delicious foods that we can make that are hot, but what I feel like we aren't actually doing, we haven't really, I feel like our food carts and food trucks, that industry, a food truck to me should have been robust in this moment in pandemics. It should have been one of the biggest growing industries. And why didn't we see a growth in those things? We saw in deliveries, we saw in all these different things, but also when it comes to push carts, when I'm in New York, when I'm even down at the Common, they're everywhere. When I'm in East Boston, where we have a large park with a huge amount of frontage, there's nothing out there. And I feel like there's a way in which we can also possibly streamline our zoning and have a conversation about how we make that more accessible as well, so that people could sell food, hot food. And I think it's easier to sell it outside because, anybody, ISD or someone can see the food, stick a thermometer in it, so on and so forth. I don't intend for this conversation to be about that. I just wanted people to know I completely agree with how we streamline our permitting system, how we streamline and include more people in the talents that they have, because an ineffective government is one that blocks out talent for the sake of rules and regulations. I think an effective, innovative government can combine the two. So I'm very excited about this conversation. The practical questions, though, I will come back to. So what I'm going to do now is have the administration, some brief comments. I know Commissioner Dempsey said he didn't have comments. He just will have some questions. So we're just going to go to those in the administration. Then we're going to go straight to the advocates. Okay. And then, like I said, some comment from the public, and then we'll do a round of questions. So I think I have Commissioner Irish first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the councilors present for this opportunity. As a part of the city's ongoing effort to plan for an equitable and sustainable economic recovery, Mayor Walsh has asked us to take a look at this. We understand that there is strong interest in our city for this, and we've had several hearings and inquiries about us taking advantage of the state law that does allow residential retail kitchens. And so we began to have internal conversations to look at how we could do this and address all the various concerns that you actually mentioned, Chair. There are a lot of things that we have to look at in order to do something like this safely. When we learned of Councilor Mejia's plans to file an ordinance, we were very happy to provide our input. And we always appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on policies that directly impact our work. We think it makes for good governance. So as I mentioned before, there is already a state law that allows residential kitchens. So we don't necessarily need to establish an ordinance in order to establish a permit process. But I think it is helpful for us to have an ordinance by establishing a fee that's more equitable than what we would have been able to charge, and also to ensure that we have a good enforcement mechanism in place to address things that may come up. However, to fully launch a program, we also need to address other concerns such as zoning. We need to establish administrative rules and regulations to address menus, food sourcing, labeling, inspection standards, hours of operations, access for inspections, because this is all new territory for us as it comes to doing inspections. And we need to have conversations with our employee unions, colleagues such as the fire department, economic development. So I think we are looking forward to having robust conversations in order to establish a program that's safe for all, that's accessible for all, in a multilingual way that we can provide access, guidance, and assistance. Clearly, we want to educate folks so that they clearly understand what you can actually produce in a residential retail kitchen. As you mentioned, it cannot be temperature-controlled food, and Assistant Commissioner Pendergrass, he'll get more into the details on inspection standards and some of the food standards that are currently already outlined in law. But overall, we're here to help move an idea like this forward because we think it makes sense, and we owe it to our residents to establish a process that ensures the safety of property of our consumers, our inspectors, and operators. So I would leave it at that for now, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are you speaking on behalf of ISD, or would each of your colleagues have also opening remarks, Commissioner?
I'll speak for ISD with the opening remarks. I think there'll be a lot of questions and opportunities for them to weigh in.
Very well. So we're going to again skip to small business, and then again with Dan and Chris from ISD, along with the Commissioner Irish being available for a back and forth. Right? Thank you, Natalia.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Mejia, for your leadership. We're always willing and able to support small businesses within the city of Boston. Excited to add these types of businesses to our kind of portfolio and to the resources that are available. I just want to remind the council and everybody watching that the city of Boston offers free technical assistance support to small businesses across the city in things like accounting, marketing, legal assistance, etc. And are excited to be able to support both the kind of onboarding of businesses and the education of folks who are interested in this type of entrepreneurial effort. In addition, we also do storefront improvements, which don't really qualify here, and help organize and run the Boston Main Streets program, which some of these businesses may fall into. So we're excited to offer these services to any small business and any entrepreneur looking to launch this business. Councillor Edwards, I do want to make sure to acknowledge your comments about the food trucks. Would love to have a conversation with you about that. We have been working really hard to support food trucks, and I know that this is not about that, but I didn't want to disregard your comments. We've been working really closely with Commissioner Irish and ISD, as well as others on this call around this effort, and are excited to see this happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to turn it over to our advocates. And we have with us Andre Antizari, who is an advocate. So we're going to go ahead, Andre. If I mispronounced your name, I apologize.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. The pronunciation was perfect, so thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Andre Antizari. I am a city planning student at Boston University, a staff member at BU School of Public Health, and I also oversee a grassroots campaign advocating for Boston to permit retail residential kitchens, also known as cottage food operations. While state regulations on cottage food operations have been in place since the year 2000, Boston and a handful of other cities in Massachusetts have yet to start permitting these types of home food operations. This is a problem because it limits the commerce and opportunities for local food producers here in the city. Really, the fact is that the state's current guidance on cottage food operations are outdated compared to countless other states in the country, and really illustrates the needs to change them to be more supportive of home food operations. At the same time, I understand that this council and city agencies work within Boston's municipal borders, and I commend this council and all the agencies within it for the tireless work you do every day for the health and safety of those in the city. This appreciation is multiplied 10 times over with the commitments that have been made and shown this past year with the COVID-19 pandemic. With regards to this ordinance, I especially want to appreciate Councilor Mejia for sponsoring it, and the Inspectional Services Division, of whom would be carrying out the state's regulations on permitting these types of operations for Boston residents. I understand that doing this with the many other duties they continually perform, like maintaining the health and safety of restaurants, recreational camps, housing inspections, pest control, and much more, is no easy task. At the same time, there are many benefits to these types of operations that it would bring to the city that shouldn't go unnoticed. These operations promote spending in the local economy. It increases the amount of money circulated within Boston. They support local farmers who can generate more revenue by supplying fresh produce to cottage food producers in the city who can prepare value-added products from produce bought from local farms right outside of Boston. These operations encourage local business development, which in turn create a stronger sense of community in neighborhoods throughout the city. And finally, they serve as a launching pad for successful business creation. For example, there are many stories from towns where a home baker starts with a residential kitchen, builds a following, and then is able to open a brick and mortar establishment from their early startup. I'm hopeful that these guidelines can come with complementary resources that were previously mentioned with regards to prospective applicants who can know what cottage foods are, educational materials on guidance, procedures in place, and small business support, as previously was mentioned, including workshops and small business grants for interested local food producers. Finally, I encourage this committee, Boston City Council, Inspectional Services Division, the Small Business Office, and if necessary, BPDA to move swiftly on establishing these guidelines for local food producers and consumers as the city continues to establish better ways to provide opportunities for their residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Irene?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me, City Council Mejia. I've enjoyed working with your office and Andre through all of this. I apologize, but for some reason, my camera is not coming on. Thank you to all the city councilors that are present, the commissioners that are present, Inspectional Services Departments, and Natalia. So I'm really excited to be seeing a few familiar faces, but also seeing other members, stakeholders really that are essential part to this conversation. I am the founder of Mani Juices. I was on a networking event last winter, or this winter, should I say, and somebody called me, I was hustling juice. And I was that retail residential kitchen entrepreneur that we are representing and talking about today. I was making my juices in my kitchen, and I was selling them through the city of Boston, and mainly because I was learning how to sell. So my testimony and me being here is really to give you the idea of support, but also the benefits that would come with this being approved, and the opportunities that lie. I think a great part of it has to do with the fact that when you decide that you are going to become a food entrepreneur, you don't know what you're doing, right? You're dealing with family recipes. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of excitement. But with that also comes you figuring out things blindly and unexpectedly, figuring out who your customer base is, and really tackling that experience, that entrepreneurship journey that a lot of us don't know what it's like because you're jumping in cold feet, because you don't have the experience. I personally have no experience in working in a kitchen, so it was very exciting. I also don't have experience selling a product. So it was very exciting. But along the way, I learned very quickly with the help of a legal team that made me realize that I was in violation of city codes and rules. So
I think we've lost our sound.
I can't. Hi, Irene. We can't hear you.
Okay. And most importantly, cost. Cost is a major component of this. It does not make any sense from an entrepreneurship perspective, from an entrepreneur's perspective, for me to be moving into a commercial kitchen without knowing who my customers are, what the development needs are, meaning understanding the food safety aspect, right? Understanding the permitting process, and understanding your markets before someone invests money and decides to move into a commercial shared use space. Now that my ISD guys have made me a lot smarter with the language, right? Before you make that decision and that leap into a bigger frying pan that would require you to invest more money, right? A residential kitchen is the wonderful opportunity to really encourage entrepreneurs to not only understand what they're getting into, understand the food safety aspect. Food safety is not just for the entrepreneur's benefit, but it's also for the consumer's benefit. In addition, it's also for the brand's benefit. So there's this opportunity. This ordinance has the opportunity to not only just build businesses within the city of Boston, but also provide a level of equity, freedom, independence, and everything else that you can really think of that is amazing in regards to achieving the American dream in so many ways. And so this is why I'm here, because I was that residential kitchen entrepreneur who hustled out of her kitchen. And I look forward to hearing from everybody's perspectives. There've already been some really great questions around the landlord-tenant relationship. I'm happy to say I actually have one of those relationships that's really wonderful with my landlord. And then most importantly, the finances, right? Because that's another aspect, another component to this. In drafting this with Andre and City Councilor Mejia's office, you know, we really had we had food safety at the core of our first draft. And from my perspective as a budding entrepreneur in the food space, I think that's one of the most important things. And education for me would be the second most important part, other than entrepreneurship's opportunities that allow the entrepreneur to understand the bigger picture, but also get a full understanding of what food safety is and why it's so important. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And to Manisha.
So thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Councillor Edward and Councillor Mejia. I thank Andre for introducing me and bringing me here to speak. As an intro, my name is Manisha Sethi Verma. I am a Wellesley, Mass resident. I have been in the Boston area for about 25 years. I am very vested into all of the economic development that's happened in Boston for those years. Although I've worked for a major corporation in technology, I have also operated 2 Subway franchises about 10 years back, one in Hyde Park and Northeastern University. I also come from a long line of family restaurant businesses in the city of Pittsburgh, where I'm originally from. My parents have operated multiple restaurants there for about 25 years as well. So thank you for having me. And I am in the process of launching a tech platform that will serve as an online marketplace where consumers and home cooks can be joined together within their communities. I have done vast market research, and through that research, through Chatham University in Pittsburgh, through Drexel's Food Lab, we feel providing a path for home chefs to gain even greater economic independence by allowing them to generate additional income from an existing skill set, such as cooking, is greatly needed, especially in light of the pandemic. We also believe more people need access to earn income by participating in a new type of shared economy without the added expense of infrastructure. Irene just spoke, and I can echo her comments that when an entrepreneur in the food business is trying to set out and actually establish themselves, it is hard to add on expenses of infrastructure and other things without really knowing whether they'll be truly successful. Small scale and micro enterprises are an important tool for those who may want to grow their business that would otherwise not have access to sufficient capital to enter the commercial food industry. I applaud and wholeheartedly support the petition here to enable retail residential kitchens in the city of Boston. As you probably already know, I think there's laws in about 49 states and Washington, D.C. that allow for cottage food sales, but these laws vary widely as to what types of foods, producers, and sales they allow. Some of Councillor Edwards, you had really brought up some really great questions. I would ask this committee to also look at what is known as MEHKOs, Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operations, which were enabled in California by AB 626 in 2018 and amended by AB 377 in 2019. Several states have already started modeling bills on the California legislation, and there is expectation that eventually, 5 years down the road, there will be nationwide adoption. So far, there has been a model that has been developed for legislation and equity framework and legislative toolkit. I'm working with the Institute of Justice as well as the Cook Alliance, that's COOK, out of California, to provide effective legislation in other states. A lot of the questions that are posed here are answered through this legislation, including liability, insurance, what the inspections, sort of the cadence of the inspections looks like. So I would ask that they do that. In my own tech platform, I have been approached by about 40 or 50 cottage food entrepreneurs who are looking for a marketplace to learn how to run a business, to be able to get online quicker, to be able to know what permitting they need and so forth. And that is what I'm endeavoring to do. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And just to give everyone, because I think one of the things I'm learning to do better is to make sure that we're all clear about what we're talking about. Cottage foods, I just looked up a basic definition to give people some examples. And they include loaf breads, rolls, biscuits, candies, confections, cakes, pastries, not with cream or any dairy product inside them, cookies, honey, jams, jellies, preserves. I have dry herbs, seasonings, mixtures, homemade pasta, cereals, trail mixes, vinegar, flavored vinegars, popcorn balls. Those are some examples that I have. Just to the advocates, if you want to also give me some more examples of, let's just make sure we're all talking about what we're talking about. Know what we're talking about. I don't know, Manisha, if you had some other examples of cottage foods, Andre or Irene.
I think you probably have it right, Councillor Edwards. That's probably a list. I know in state to state it varies, but your list is probably accurate for Massachusetts. I do think that, again, the cottage foods that have been produced here in Massachusetts, eventually there's probably room for expansion on those, but I believe they're correct as of now.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I mean, cottage is not understood. Andrea, yeah, I was going right to you.
Thank you. I think everything you said on the list is accurate, and I think ISD could speak to this better just in terms of what foods classify, because there are classifications of temperature-controlled foods and non-temperature controlled foods, and this ordinance is advocating for establishing guidelines for those non-temperature controlled foods, baked goods, breads, like you said, no cream-filled foods, things like that.
Okay. It was just kind of a pull back up. Let's make sure we understand what we're talking about. I don't have anybody signed up for public testimony, so we're going to go ahead and then have the comprehensive conversation. I did actually look up an FAQ from the state, because I believe, as Commissioner Irish noted, it's already legal in the state. And so I brought up the FAQ to understand a little bit more about the process. And I sent it to Christine, who could send it out to all the panelists and send it out to all of my colleagues as well. And just again, to reiterate what Commissioner Irish said, while it is already legal, the permitting process happens at the local board and the local commission. So it has to be city by city approved. So that's what we're talking about today. Again, I just took this small break to remind people 30,000-foot view, what products we're talking about, and also why we're in this process. So I'm going to go back up to my colleague, and we'll go in order of arrival for any questions. And Commissioner Dempsey, I'm just going to add you in after the commission as any questions you may have. Okay. All right. So Councilor Mejia, you are our lead sponsor.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards, and thank you to everyone who has already provided testimony. I have a few questions for the administration and just wanted to acknowledge that the administration has been working closely with our office. So we've had meetings and have had many opportunities to unpack and a lot of this. So just really grateful for your partnership in this process. So just quickly for Natalia, our office reached out to other cities and towns to see how they implemented retail residential kitchens. Some of these cities and towns say that very few people have taken advantage of these permits. There's clearly a need and desire for this process to be permanent in Boston. So I'm curious to learn what can we do to make sure that as many people as possible utilize this process. And I think about a lot of folks from, I know that Commissioner Irish had mentioned that there were 22 folks who received citations because they were operating illegally. So I'm just curious, in terms of the rollout, what are we thinking about in terms of supporting this process?
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. So I would like to just start off by offering some kind of information sessions and workshops that we would host in partnership with your office and obviously in partnership with Commissioner Irish and ISD to ensure that anyone who's interested can really understand the process and be able to go through whatever steps are necessary in order to establish their business. I want to also just note that we've been hosting conference calls to small businesses every Tuesday since the beginning of the pandemic, virtually at 3 p.m. They're hosted live on Facebook and also on Zoom, so folks can join. We have interpretation services available in Chinese, Vietnamese, and Spanish every single week. So, I think one way to get folks really to know about that is to share those platforms for communicating with us directly. I think once we have all of the requirements clear and established, I think we would do some additional outreach in our newsletter, which touches on 16,000 registered businesses. And then I would welcome all partnerships from everyone on this call to get us connected with not just the 22 violations, which I think is obviously an easy first group to do outreach to, but with all of your constituents and all the folks that you engage with, making direct lines to both our office and ISD in order to ensure people can have all those resources. I think this is going to be an outreach effort. My office has not received many requests around this particular topic in the past, but as we move forward, I anticipate that we will get more requests and information about this. And so we would want to make sure that we are connecting them to all the right people and resources. Manisha, I also just want to note that we do have a technical assistance provider RFP that is on a rolling basis. And so it sounds like to me that you have a lot of expertise in helping to establish these businesses and get them set up. And so I welcome you to check out that RFP because if we have a technical assistance provider on our kind of list of providers available, we can always connect businesses directly to those providers to help with additional technical assistance. And I'm happy if you want to just email me your contact information, I'm happy to send you that information. But I think, like I mentioned, I think outreach is going to be really important, and making sure that we have a place for people to go to get that information will be really significant.
Thank you. And Councilor Edwards, I just want to be mindful of time. I do have one more question, or two more questions, but I wasn't sure what you were looking at in terms of time.
If you could ask both questions, and then the panelists, maybe one or two can answer it, and then we'll go on. Is that okay? Could you do them both?
Okay, I just want to be respectful of the time.
Thank you.
So one of the things that a lot of people are concerned about, including our office, is around the health inspections and just kind of like making sure that we're finding ways to address the sanitary conditions of a home. I'm just curious how we can find ways to ensure that these health inspections are slowly to address the sanitary conditions of the kitchen, or if there's other things that we need to be mindful of.
And your second question?
And then my second question is that we've heard from several advocates, particularly advocates who are undocumented, that they're a little bit scared about letting government into their homes for fear that finding out that they might be undocumented, and finding out that more people live there than previously believed. And I'm just curious, just kind of want to just throw that out there in terms of something for us to think about. And then I'm curious of whether or not we've had any updates on the zoning code. I know that there was going to be an update in terms of what we need to consider and think about in terms of the zoning issue.
So if any of the panelists, we have three kind of questions. A zoning one, which we might consider for later on, Councilor Mejia. That's kind of a general question about updates in the zoning, if it's okay, but to focus again on the folks who might be in crowded apartments or have complicated other legal issues and allowing the state to come in or the city to come in. And then also in terms of sanitation. So those are the two buckets.
Madam Chair, if you'd like, we could address all three. I could have Chris English can speak to the zoning code, and I'll also have Dan Pendergrass get into some more detail about the inspection standards, but there are already existing standards for sanitary code for residential retail kitchens, as well as for just residences in general. And we want to make sure that folks are meeting that. But relative to citizenship, that's not something that ISD would be looking into. However, we do believe, and we'd have to do more exploration on it, but we do believe that folks who are operating should also be registered as a business. So we've encouraged that with short-term rentals. We've had folks to go to the city clerk's office to register as a business. So we think that would be the same thing that would apply here. But I'll toss it to Dan Pendergrass. Dan, if you could just speak to the questions about the inspection standards and what we'd be looking for.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. So as a commissioner has stated, the current state sanitary code 105 CMR 590 currently has conditions in which kitchens, up until now, commercial kitchens should be operating and kept in. They need to be kept in a clean and sanitary manner. Everything from equipment to cooking surfaces to storage surfaces, etc. All refrigeration and food source should be kept according to code as well. We would be conducting at least annual inspections if a retail residential kitchen is permitted. So after the initial permitting process and they're inspected to open and approved to open, we then would conduct routine sanitary inspections of these licensed retail residential kitchens. Our inspectors would walk through the kitchen facilities where the food is being prepared, stored, and any other storage areas where foods associated with the business would be stored in. Our goal would be to try to separate as much as we could between their family food and food source, and particularly where the business would be stored. And with that being said, we would conduct routine sanitary inspections. The conditions should be kept in a clean, sanitary manner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think it was Chris English.
Thanks, Counselor. Just a brief note about the zoning. Right now, the zoning code doesn't have an adequate use definition for this type of operation in any part of the code. There are some accessory uses that are related to businesses, but don't necessarily fully encompass the type of operation here. So what we've been working with the BPDA on is drafting some language to have an amendment to the zoning code to create a new definition for an accessory use. That would then, we would also update the neighborhood tables to make this, to define where this use is conditional, forbidden, and allowed. That process would have to go through the BPDA board and the zoning commission, as you're aware, but that would allow us to really, fully cover this type of operation in a home, but also involve the community in a public review process when applications come forward, similar to other ZBA proposals.
Thank you. I see, Irene, you've raised your hand. Were you going to be answering one of the questions from Council Mejia?
I am. To Commissioner Irish, Chris, and Dan's points, I think that from my perspective as a budding juice entrepreneur here in the city of Boston, one of the things that helped me greatly was taking a food safety and product development class through UMass's agricultural department. First of all, I found out that I was in violation with food safety through another entrepreneur. And then my legal team helped me understand the issues around operating in my kitchen. So in taking the food safety class, it really demystified a lot of things that Dan just mentioned, right? So these are things that make sense, yet if you work in a commercial kitchen, it's a no-brainer, it's easy. The other thing is that the food safety class, which I shared.
I can't hear Irene.
I think we've lost Sandy.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So with, based on Commissioner Irish and Dan and Chris's comments in regards to the food safety aspect, I think a lot of us who are in this space that don't know what we have to do, we can be easily intimidated by the sanitary requirements. And one of the things that has helped me through this process is taking a class that's, it's called Food Safety and Product Development through UMass's agricultural school. And honestly, I nerded out with so much joy because it talks about current GMP practices, to Dan's point, how the space, how your kitchen or your workstation should be cleaned, it should be maintained, how you separate different equipment from other surfaces. It's just a wonderful opportunity for anybody, which a lot of food entrepreneurs are not privy to this class. And so I think that one of the things that would be really essential in addressing the sanitation requirement would be encouraging the entrepreneur or requiring the entrepreneur that they take this class, because it does demystify everything that you think is scary about the food safety aspect and sanitation of the space.
Thank you very much. Manisha, if you could, I see your hand is raised, and then we want to get through other city councilors. Manisha, your hand is raised. I think you froze on my screen. I'm going to go ahead and go down the line for councilors. But Manisha, when you get back, I will call you on you to answer. I don't know what happened. It's just technical things. It's the world we live in today. Councilor Flynn is, I think he said he's all set on question. Councilor Braden?
I had a quick question about if the entrepreneur lives in rental property, what sort of permissions would they need to get, and insurance coverage from their landlords?
Anyone?
Yes, we definitely would want to ensure that the owner has granted permission to renters. But we think the zoning process will also address that, because the owner would need to apply for the relief through the zoning process.
Point of clarification, Commissioner Irish, so my understanding is if my tenant wants to do it, I'm the one who has to apply for the zoning relief?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor, I see 2 hands are raised. I think Manisha might be back. Manisha?
Yep, sorry. I think we lost power here momentarily. I apologize. You can hear me, yes?
Yes, you're good to go.
Great. So the question about liability insurance, Councillor Edwards, I think you had asked that question, and that might also apply here. There is a few companies that, under my research, that do provide insurance to the home cook or the home cottage food producer. One is Flip, F-L-I-P, and there is another one that I don't have the name for yet, but I'm happy to send it later. Both of them are financially very feasible. From the last cost analysis I had done, it was about $30 or $40 a month, and that provides some extra coverage that I think most can take advantage of.
Excellent, but I think the question is specifically, and I want to make sure we answered it, in order for a tenant, which for many people who I'm sure already know, majority of Black and Brown people who I know a lot of, who Councilor Mejia is specifically concerned about being able to have access to this, majority rent. So it's a 2-step process for those renters who want to set up a residential kitchen. It would be first that they go through whatever, thoughts and set up their own business in their own mind. Second, if I understand you correctly, Commissioner, they would need permission from the landlord, or at least the City of Boston is going to require proof of that permission. And then that landlord needs to go and seek ZBA or go to the ZBA. Am I correct?
That's correct. However, the ownership permission, we could, get that through the zoning process. Like there wouldn't need to be a separate proof of the owner's approval aside from the zoning. But zoning relief is granted to a property. It has to be a property involved, and the owner needs to be involved.
Right. So if there is no, I guess you're saying basically there is assumptions of the owner's approval if they're going to the ZBA.
Yes.
Okay. So still, though, a tenant would need to seek their landlord's approval.
Yes.
Or the owner's approval. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Braden, was that it?
That's it for now. Thank you.
Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I want to follow up on this zoning question for Commissioner Irish and maybe Chris as well. I mean, it seems like it's not obvious to me that it would have to be a ZBA process. I mean, it seems like another option would be if we, in the zoning code, redefined residential uses such that they could, include a residential kitchen use. And I'm just curious where sort of your conversations with BPDA have landed so far on that front.
Chris, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think we would include this, and the discussion has been so far as an accessory use to a residential use. So not necessarily changing the residential use of the particular unit, but adding in sort of this accessory use for business purposes.
But could we, if we added it in as an accessory use, could we structure it such that it was permitted in large residential zones of the city? I'm just trying to think about how we don't, I mean, I know we've been talking about the fact there need to be some publicity, and we don't know how many people will take us up on this initially, but in a world in which a robust world of residential kitchens took hold, I 100% agree that landlords need to be giving permission. The idea that we would also be burdening the ZBA with one-by-one petitions on that front seems suboptimal to me bureaucratically. So I was just wondering if you've thought about sort of whether we could have broad permitted zones or kind of how to deal with that.
I think the BPDA is definitely taking a look at that. One other option we've talked about is having these types of applications be part of the ZBA subcommittee hearings. So they sort of fit in that smaller change because it's simply a change of use, no work to be done for the most part. So sort of trying to accelerate the review and approval process that way. Maybe the best of both worlds to have it separated out, but also an easier process. But it's certainly up for discussion. I mean, I don't think anything's final.
Yeah, I guess I would just add my 2 cents that I feel like we're using the ZBA subcommittee to solve a problem of like our current like backlog and pipeline, right? So it's then like if we also add these on top, I don't know. I just think, and technically you would be doing it for a property, right? So then that property, the accessory use like approved. So then, you know, if a tenant moved out, a new tenant moved in, technically they wouldn't, like, if that was our proxy for landlord approval, you wouldn't actually need that anymore once it was approved. It seems to me like it would make more sense to think about it a little bit differently. But maybe we can have, you know, follow-up conversation on that, I'm sure, the working session stuff. And then my question, and this might be for the sponsor or for ISD, I don't know if you guys have consulted on this, but the language of the current ordinance says that, you know, folks would need to be certified through ServSafe and meet Massachusetts Food Allergens Awareness Training certification requirements. I just wondered if those two trainings, like, is that coming out of the state sanitary code? Is there like, how did we pick those trainings? Are there others? I mean, I'm just thinking about the testimony we just heard about, you know, a useful one. So just trying to understand how we got to those two.
Yeah, so the Certified Food Protection Manager course is required as part of having a health permit. What we do here at ISD is we provide a list to new potential businesses, permit holders, where there are certified food safety consultants that are sponsored and approved on the Mass Department of Public Health website in order to offer this certified food protection management training. So it offers a number of different venues in which people can do it, and, you know, different languages and other things to try to help folks. And as far as the Allergen Awareness training, again, it's a sponsored through the Mass Department of Public Health website, where there are some agencies that offer this online training. So the difference between the Certified Food Protection Management training and the Allergen Awareness training is the Allergen Awareness training is, you know, strictly watching a video on the types and the importance of food allergies in food. And therefore, once it's completed, a certificate would be issued to the person who applied to do so.
And just to confirm, so it sounds like these are the two trainings that ISD would want the people to have.
Correct. In order, moving forward, in order for a person or a business to get a retail residential kitchen license, we would want them to provide who the Certified Food Protection Manager is with a copy of their certificate. And that person should also be trained in the Allergen Awareness training as well, correct?
Great. And then can I ask you, in terms of, and this again, could be for ISD, could be for the sponsor, in terms of the retail aspect of these kitchens, so they're preparing Cottage Foods for retail sale. Is the presumption that in licensing these, we're also sort of licensing them as places for people to come and make that transaction? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, are these retail kitchens, so we know they're the back of the house, but are they also the front of the house, is I guess what I'm asking? Or is the vision that, you know, that they're doing delivery or that they're producing things that then might get sold somewhere else around the city? Like, to what extent are we sort of, what's our formal position we're taking on that retail aspect by doing this?
So the purpose and the thought behind the cottage food or a retail residential kitchen would be for direct sales to the public through multiple venues, whether it's online ordering, delivery, say through a second or a third party app, or preparing the food and selling, say, from a farmer's market. So the differentiation between a retail residential kitchen would be selling directly to the public or the consumer. If a cottage, you know, kitchen would want to sell directly to another business, that would require separate and additional licensing, which they would have to get a wholesale license with the Mass Department of Public Health.
Got it. And what about if I want to sell to the public, but I want to kind of like, open up a window in my house and sell out of the window to folks stopping by? Is that allowable under this?
That may be a question best answered with the zoning piece of it.
Mr. Bach, I believe the language is direct to consumer in the state FAQ I sent around, and I am of the same mindset. I'm not sure what direct to consumer means in terms, maybe that's for us to fill in as Dan was saying, but just want to let you know that was.
Yeah, I think it's a relevant question whether people would whether it would become a place also that people might queue and purchase things and such. I imagine that will come up. Great. I think sorry, Commissioner.
I just want to add, so yeah, that is something that I think that zoning would also be helpful when addressing that. Although we're having this conversation about establishing a permitting process, we do have one resident who's already ahead of us and went to ZBA and got a variance for a residential type kitchen. And the decision on that was that they could have delivery, I believe it's delivery only, if I'm correct, Chris.
That's correct.
Okay. Where is this person?
I know it's in the south end.
Okay.
I don't have the exact address.
Lydia really wanted that entrepreneur to be an Eastie person, but.
I'm about to get some fresh jams down the street. I'm just saying. Anyway, Councilor Bach, if we can.
Can I lodge one more question?
You can, yes.
Which is just if the commissioner could speak to, so section F of section 1 says the Commissioner of Inspectional Services shall promulgate rules and regs necessary to implement and enforce the provisions of this section. I'm just wondering sort of what ISD thinks the kind of scale of promulgation is there. Like, is it something where most of the rules and regs are in that sanitary code that's referenced above, and so it's going to be relatively simple? Is it kind of like a big apparatus? Like, what would the expectation in terms of workload and such be for the department?
It's difficult to predict the workload, given that we're not sure how many people will take advantage of this. But in terms of additional regulation that we need to enact, a lot of it's already codified in the state, on the state level. But then there'd be some Boston-specific things that we would want to look to include. We want to make sure there's language that folks are agreeing that they're going to give us consent, right, when we need to do inspections. We want to address advertising. We want to make sure that any advertisement does reflect that there's an approved, let's say, registration number or permit number from the city, so the public has confidence in that. And we also need to, like I said, have conversations with our colleagues in the fire department. We also want to take a look at this from the housing code standpoint. Although they're separate, we still want to make sure that if we're in a unit and we're approving it for sale to consumers, that we're also looking at other things to make sure that the minimum health and safety standards are being met. So there are things like that we need to work out and also just implement them on an administrative level.
Great, thanks so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just going through the 4 pages, and obviously things around hand washing and food contact service surfaces and pets and rodents and stuff is covered. I just want to maybe speak a little bit to life safety, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, egress situations arise when, particularly in apartment buildings, when one unit smoke detector goes off continuously. And what tends to happen is other residents will deactivate that smoke detector. They'll potentially remove the battery or disengage it if it's hardwired. And so just want to make sure that we're going through this, that we're putting some emphasis on life safety, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, et cetera, when you're dealing with, ovens and stoves and you're working in volume and you might be emitting smoke and fumes and stuff like that. So everything seems to be covered except for the life safety portion. So if someone can speak to me about what, if any, measures will be taken to ensure that smoke detectors are working, carbon monoxide detectors are working, proper ventilation, and that the building has sufficient appropriate egress access to get folks in and out safely in the event that there's an incident and/or smoke and fire.
I can take that. Thank you, Councilor. So with residential retail kitchens, is a typical residential kitchen. It's not, this 105, 590 CMR doesn't require them to have any commercial type of operations or typical home. But we also have 105 CMR 410, which sets those health and safety standards in residences for with respect to life safety, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. Those are all required under the quote unquote housing code. And that's why I mentioned I want to make sure that we're also looking at both while we're there. Although one is directly relevant to giving a permit, we also want to make sure that the other things are addressed as well. And I think there's also opportunity to go above and beyond the minimum standards. So that's why I'm interested in having that conversation with the fire department, because there may be some things that that we can also implement to enhance safety without creating like barriers that folks can't circumvent. So I think we can go beyond the minimum health and safety requirements that are already in place for residences.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that.
I would like to add, I think this is the perfect time to add to Commissioner Irish and
really quick, Councilor Flaherty has the floor.
Oh,
so
sorry.
Do you have any?
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. That was the only question I had. So I look forward to anyone else's response through the.
Thank you. So I have several questions in terms of the practical implications, but also just in general, how this can be rolled out or work. So I'll put some of these questions we won't have answers for right now. And just to let, again, the folks know, this is the beginning of the conversation. When we will then have working sessions, very likely, where we're addressing different aspects of this ordinance. The working sessions are about the language, where we get really into the detail and have that robust back and forth where the comma should go, if this phrase makes sense, if this is opening us up to live, all those things like that happen in working sessions. But so part of the questions I want to know is, does direct to consumer, what does that mean? As Councilor Bach was on that line, I don't want to, my third floor unit sitting down parachutes of donuts to folks or whatever without, what is direct to consumer? Does it include online? Can someone just then suddenly set up a Facebook page and be like, hey, I'm selling this stuff from my house? I'm not opposed to it, just curious what it means. Also, I think it's a wonderful opportunity if we're going to grow business to small business and to City Hall. Is there a way that direct to consumer could include us helping out some of these businesses and selling some of these baked goods in City Hall or with some of our city locations or outside of them? I just think it's, we have been discussing procurement and city contracts as an issue in the news. Is there a way that we can blend both of these things and allow for some more diversity and for some of our contractors? And then also, I am curious about, so I guess I'm going to stay on the landlord tenant thing for a little bit. So if, as Councilor Bach notes, that a zoning amendment is technically for the building and going to the ZBA then makes it permanent, I could speak as a small landlord. I'm inclined to give permission to individual tenants. I'm not inclined to make it permanent for my building. And so how do we, the ZBA may not make sense then, because I don't want my building forever to have this permit, but I may want, the lady upstairs, the single mom who's an amazing tenant who says she's really good at making jams. Sure. So how would I prove my approval of her? Do you need a letter? Would you want an affidavit? Like how would that make sense? Short of making because when she's gone, I don't want, if she leaves or she, decides this is not for her, it's personal, right? It's personal just for the person who I like, who I respect, who I think is an amazing person. So how do we do that? How do we balance that? Because it is deeply personal, I think, in some cases. I'm not Peabody. I'm not like Trinity. I'm not a huge, person. We're talking about the triple decker, typical owner who lives in the place. So how do we show that? And then of the 22 violators of the sanitation code, how many of them were making cottage products versus straight roasting like lambs, over an open pit in their house? what could you talk about the gradation of the violations that you found? I'm really curious about what we're really talking about. And 22 doesn't seem that many. Do you think it's because of the fact that it isn't happening that much, or that we could only find 22? Because if it is just about finding 22, then I'm very concerned about how you're going to enforce this law. Can't find them. And then I know this is a lot, but the other thing I'm thinking about is the debate we had with, not debate so much with ISD, but with Airbnb and other folks. I don't know if you remember, Dion, we outright said there will be no tenants who can have Airbnbs in their buildings, even with the landlord's permission. And one of the reasons why is because we felt it was a mini hotel within a mini hotel. And we felt the other option is getting a roommate. And it was also about the enforcement or lack thereof when you get down to the tenant level. So this is reminding me of that back and forth that we had. So I know that's a lot, but I'm, and I see Manisha, you raised your hand. Again, I hope it's to answer the kind of questions that I had. Finally, Manisha, if you could repeat the micro, MEHKO, that name and those statutes. They are statewide, and for us to change the state laws here, we would have, it's not here at the city council level, but I am curious to read them. I know it's a lot. I'll guide through. So, Manisha, you raised your hand. And, or Commissioner, or Natalia, who?
Well, Madam Chair, can I ask for Chris English, because he's going to have to leave. He can speak to how relief can be limited to an applicant.
When a use is a conditional use in the zoning code, the ZBA has the ability to grant to that petitioner only and for a time limited period of time. So upon approval, the approval can be for 1 year, or it can be for 2 years. It can be also, the condition could be to that petitioner only, so that it doesn't carry over.
Okay. So then I guess we're back to where Bach was like, but the line's already long in front of the ZBA, which is another conversation. But okay, so thank you for that. And then the Manisha raised your hand.
Councilor Edward, I also have to run at 11:30. If it's okay with you, I'd like to just address the other point that you had asked.
Yeah.
So I think part of our role in small business is to make sure that businesses are prepared for those opportunities, like to sell, whether it's through farmers markets or through B2B or, at City Hall. So part of what we would do is we would work with businesses to develop kind of their business plans. And we can do that through either one-on-one TA or look at projections over time, after they're established. I think as it pertains to procurement, I think obviously if there are large enough contracts or large enough procurement opportunities for some of these businesses, we would walk them through that. I think in particular for minority and women who are establishing these types of businesses, we would want to get them through the certification process so that they can be counted towards those numbers. But obviously that's at a larger scale, and we would need to do a lot of kind of work with individual businesses, but we would be happy to offer the technical assistance that is required for those businesses. It obviously gets more in the weeds, and it's very dependent on the individual businesses, but yes, that is absolutely something we would offer.
Thank you. Before either of you have to go, I don't know if you can address what the 22 violations look like, the gravity of them.
So I don't have specifics on that, but I can say that, I know we testified previously that we had 22 complaints. I don't believe we've issued any violations, right? And from the complaints that I've seen, some of those folks would not be able to fit under this particular program because the food that they were making and selling would not comply with cottage food definitions.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Natalia and Chris, if you have to go. Manisha?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edwards. So I'll start off with the latter question that you had, which was just stating what the bill was. That's MEHKO. That's what is known in California, Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operations, enabled by AB 626 in 2018, amended by AB 377 in 2019. I don't have a direct answer to some of your questions just yet. I do have some verbiage around what direct to consumer means in some of the other states, if at all. That helps here from a verbiage perspective. I will say from my research with the Cook Alliance that the 22 violations that are being questioned here, when they had done some preliminary research on how many kitchens were operating without a license in California, there was about 50,000 found. And Massachusetts is 1/5 the size of California. So I can tell you there's probably about 20,000 here also. I will say that they're posing, as far as we know, no direct threat to consumers, but that's a question I asked of the ISD, all respectfully. Has there, besides the complaints, has there ever been a foodborne illness that has been reported out of any of these unlicensed kitchens or complaints? Is there an illness that has been reported, or is it a complaint? That's just a curiosity question.
Before we go there, I actually know what. Go ahead, Commissioner. I apologize.
Dan Pendergrass, can you respond?
Yes, thank you, Manisha. So to our knowledge, there have been no tie-in directly to a particular instance of foodborne illness or any foodborne illness outbreak. These residential businesses have been brought to the attention of ISD Health via complaints, and there have been no link or proven link to a foodborne illness outbreak at this time.
Thank you. Very quickly, then, I guess my last question is to ISD. I think Natalia may have left. So, do you support this? Is this something you look? I mean, I know it's legal statewide, but do you support creating the process for this and making it real in Boston?
And as I said earlier, I think we owe it to our residents to tackle the challenges, to create a permitting process. So we do support it, but there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot of questions to be answered.
Thank you. Wonderful.
I would just echo Commissioner Irish's sentiment.
I have the floor, and then Commissioner Dempsey will be going next. So thank you so much. I just wanted to appreciate the summary of some of the ISD and concerns that we have. And then I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Dempsey, who had asked to be part of the questions conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Council Flaherty and Commissioner Irish. Both of you has addressed a lot of the issues that we would have. So a lot of this that we need to be cautious here is not to over-regulate. And I'm glad to hear that ISD has most of the permitting under control. So fire has some concerns, and mostly we're going to probably be anticipating that there'll be more cooking fires, basically because these are non-commercial appliances, and when you overuse a residential appliance, it leads to breakdowns and buildup and whatever. So that's one of the concerns. And as Council Flaherty said, the smoke detectors is going to be another big issue. We've had fatalities with people taking the batteries out or disabling detectors. So that's going to be a big concern. So knowing all that, and mind you, I'm just making a statement instead of the questions now because most of them got answered. But so what I think we will work closely with ISD on this whole process, and I think from the fire department point, we can have our fire ed education unit maybe do a flyer or something to go along with whatever the applications or whatever highlighting the fire safety concerns that people need to keep in mind. So there's not really a huge role in this from the fire department standpoint, other than think where it's new, we're going to find things as they come up. So, and hopefully they won't be serious, and then we can make adjustments as this moves along. One of the things from the outside point of the building, where we would be concerned with on some of these smaller streets, like in East Boston and whatever, if people start double parking to pick up their product and whatever. So it's, you know, it sounds not that major, but if we're trying to get by and the street's blocked, that is an issue. So other than that, I think the fire marshal will be working with ISD, and that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize. Irene wasn't trying to get a word, and it was actually Natalia. So I apologize to both Irene and to Natalia, who, if she's still here, if you had a comment or response. I know I said your name actually, so my apologies to both women. Is she not here?
Yeah, Natalia's gone.
Oh, well, my apologies. I see. Fire Marshal Tully has raised his hand. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Council, for inviting us today in this important topic. Echoing Commissioner Dempsey, my questions early on, they kind of were answered by, Councilor Bach. She brought it up, like, how does the retail end of the kitchen work? Am I coming through? Because you look like you're frozen.
You look
okay.
You're fine.
I was just wondering.
I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean to look fine. I mean, you're coming through.
Okay, great. My question was the retail end of it. If in fact the cottage kitchens are going to be allowed to sell food, by appointment, but you are coming to their house to actually pick up the breads or the jellies or the pickled whatever. Double parking, that would definitely be, a public safety concern, not only for the fire department, but for, ambulances. We are in like public works, even in the winter with plowing streets, in the, where we live, we have to deal with snowbanks. And then, so that was kind of answered. So moving forward, that would definitely be something that I would like to be included on, like the retail end of the business. And then this is kind of for Dion and Chief of Staff English. How each month you offer the ADU workshop? That might be a good program where you could bring in the subject matter experts from the health department and zoning, where future entrepreneurs might be able to, log on a monthly basis and, learn from other people that are already in the trade, but also learn all the hurdles that need to be jumped over before you can start producing foods and selling them retail. So I'm sure you've already thought of that, but I think that'd be a good idea, having a monthly workshop. That's all I have. And thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you. So that's kind of our first round. Just a point of clarification, if we're going to the ZBA, this is again to the commissioner, does that mean then doing the same normal process, going through civic associations? Would there be then a notice to the 300-foot zoning, that radius, to let everyone know, by the way, that, Lydia would like to start selling cookies? Is that the same process you envision for this?
No, we envision the same notification process would exist in terms of us mailing to abutters, but in terms of the public hearing, it would be a streamlined process, as Chris mentioned earlier, for what we currently use for our small subcommittee. So it wouldn't require all the civic association meetings. It would be more of an informal meeting here on a Thursday evening at ISD, or virtually now, and then it would be on the board's agenda on a regular meeting as sort of a consent agenda. So they wouldn't go over each project one by one. They'd go on the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Thank you. So at this point, we can go back through a round. I would encourage, if my colleagues if we don't have very, again, to know, this conversation is going to continue. We're going to keep it in committee to have exactly what Commissioner Dempsey and Commissioner Irish have noted, a robust understanding of the permitting process. I think we need to finish that sentence and at least understand where they're going before we push for an ordinance that allows for the permitting process. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm not saying we're going to have perfection, but I think all of us have certain definitions, concerns, and questions that we need to fill in the gaps. And then when we do this ordinance to allow for the permitting process, we already know where we're going through. That's what our working sessions will be dedicated to. I, unfortunately, will have to leave in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to turn this over shortly to Councillor Flaherty. Before I do that, and we go through the round, I did want to give Irene the floor. She has been waiting patiently, but I wanted to make sure, sorry, Irene, sometimes I just have to get through my round before I can go back to folks who've already spoken. So Irene?
I understand, and it's a pleasure to be part of this experience, but also learn. So thank you for circling back. I want to just touch base on something that you've been talking about, and you and Councillor Breeden, and that is the insurance. My research, obviously I have insurance, and mine covers it covers the business, it covers flooding, it covers if anybody gets slips and falls. And so my coverage is the liability is up to $4 million total. So as a resident, as a landlord, your home would be covered under my flip insurance that I have now.
Thank you. That's extremely informative. And I think that is, again, one of the things we could work out in a working session is how to approach your landlord about this idea, right? And how to make sure that they are fully understood. Because, when you first hear about home kitchens, your reaction is, oh my God, what are they going to be cooking? How often? Is it becoming a mini restaurant in the house, right? That's your first reaction. This is incredibly informative for me too, to understand how limited the definition is, that they're gonna, all of these different things. And the other thing that I think is very important is, Irene, your insurance, does it cover like general liability? So if someone slips and falls coming into my house to get your cookies or to get your juices, does your insurance cover that, or is it just with the product itself?
So flip is $300 a year, and you actually have to pay it up front. So that's number one. Number two, the general liability, the way they have it, it's for the way that they described it to me. Someone flips and falls, trips or falls, but I'm assuming that it would have to do with them coming in and working in and around my space. There's product liability, and that's $2 million, and then there's personal business equipment, that's 10, and then there's damage to premise rented. So that's up to $300,000. This covers any damage I cause to the commercial, to a commercial space, as well as my space that I'm working in, my apartment.
Extremely informative. Thank you so much. And maybe we can get a sample of a policy that we could look at as well. If it covers your unit, but if smoke were to come in to another person's unit, it wouldn't cover that unit, I'm understanding. Or how do we prove that they were coming to get cookies from you and not just a general invitee? But this is the problem when you have a law degree. You just have a bunch of useless information and questions that come with it. So my apologies for that. But I'm excited about this. So I'm going to turn it over for another round. Councillor Braden has raised her hand. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question. Not everyone will be able to avail themselves of a residential kitchen. I was wondering if there's a possibility of exploring other locations like community centers or church kitchens that could also be permitted to allow these entrepreneurs to have access to a an inspected, food-safe facility in a community in a community center or a church kitchen that they could avail of. Is that something we should also explore while we're investigating this? Because not everyone will be able to do it in their home.
Councillor Braden, just so for our clarification, do you mean, for example, if there's a Sacred Heart in East Boston has a large kitchen downstairs, and would you then that kitchen could be made available, certified, and I as an individual get a permit to cook there on Mondays, for example, then you get the permit to cook there on Tuesdays, and is that what you're saying? Shared kitchen space?
Shared kitchen space. I know we do have collaborative kitchens, but I think shared kitchen space on some of these, exactly that scenario. I know of a church community here in Austin Brighton. A Brazilian woman approached them to ask if she could prepare foods to take to the Caribbean Festival. And she did it for a few years, and then they discovered that it was illegal and she wasn't able to do it anymore. So I just think that that's another potential outlet, that not somebody who maybe does it on a seasonal basis rather than a year-round operation. But I just think it's that level of flexibility and responsiveness to economic empowerment that we're trying to offer to our many in our immigrant community as a way to get a foothold and establish their business in Boston.
Understood. I see that the lead sponsor has raised her hand, and so is Manisha. Councillor Mejia, do you mind if I go to Manisha, and then we'll just go back through to you and the other colleagues?
Well, I thought we were doing the second round of questions, so I wasn't sure if you needed us to raise our hands or you were going to go in the order which we came in through. That's why I wasn't sure what the process was, because normally you do that, so I wasn't sure.
Right. I am going to go through the second round, but Braden raised her hand, so I called on her.
Okay.
And so,
we're waiting.
Okay. Manisha?
Yeah, it'll be quick. I just have an answer for Councillor Braden's query. Through Craft Foods, CRAFT, out of Chatham University, they are performing some research for me today that will show GIS mapping, so where kitchens are, as long as they're been publicly advertised as shared kitchen spaces. Churches may or may not be included, because sometimes churches, I know here in Wellesley, they only do it if you're actually a nonprofit. If you're a profit, they're unable to do it. And then every health department has their own regulations. But they will perform some extensive research, which will show shared kitchen spaces that are publicly advertised as viable uses. So thank you.
Thank you. Dan has raised his hand. If you want to go ahead and answer the question, then we're going to go through again, Councillor Mejia and Councillor Braden, Bach, Flaherty for any concluding remarks. Councillor Flaherty will, in about 3 minutes, will take over as the chair, or will chair this to conclusion. But Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards. And I just want to add on to Councillor Breeden's question, about shared kitchens. The city of Boston does currently have 2 permitted and licensed shared use kitchen facilities here in Boston. One of them is Commonwealth Kitchens, which operates on Quincy Street, 196 Quincy Street here in Dorchester. And the other one is First Baptist Church, 633 Center Street in Jamaica Plain. They've both achieved and obtained the appropriate use and occupancy zoning issues in order to do that. And they've also gone through all the health code requirements and operational procedures to do so. So there are currently a couple of locations available. Councillor Breeden, if you have any constituents looking to utilize some properly licensed and zoned kitchen facilities here in Boston.
Thank you.
Sure.
Going back again, Councillor Mejia.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that you know, I come into these spaces with a can-do attitude. I believe everything and anything is possible when we're really serious about trying to remove barriers and creating space for people to really have financial and economic success. So I'm really grateful to my colleagues and all their thoughtful questions to help us unpack what we need to do to get there. So really thankful, especially a shout out to Kenzie, Councilor Bach, who always brings it. Yo, I'm gonna have to hire you, Kenzie, because you always got the right questions. But so really quick in regards to just residential kitchens, this is for Manisha. I'm just curious in your experience, have any led to an increase? Do you know if any has led into increase in fires? Like establishing residential kitchens have led to increase in kitchen fires? And also, what are other cities and states doing when it comes to the landlord-tenant relationship? I mean, I'm also a landlord, and I'm curious about what that relationship would look like. And as someone who knows how important it is to create as many opportunities for people to be able to thrive in the city, would just like to know any recommendations that you have to share with us to kind of smooth out that relationship.
So is this a question for me, Councilor Mejia?
All of them for you.
Okay. The last question, landlord-tenant relationship, and what other states or other places have done to address this. I don't have that offhand, but I will send it to you. The text that I have has been in the realm of private residences. So I'm sure that there are other uses of this where there's a rented facility such as this. So I will get back to you after this. Leading to fires, no, I have never heard in my view, neither from the Cook Alliance or from other states and places that this is actually legally allowed. Utah and Colorado are also following, by the way, in California's movement, that it has resulted in fires or residential fires. I do believe in part that may be because they are limited to the amount that they can sell. So in California, and as an example, I believe there's a cap of $50,000 per year. And if they graduate past that mark, they have to graduate to a commercial kitchen because it's not viable to produce that much out of a residential kitchen. And I'm sorry, your third question, was that about economic viability? Yeah. So yes, for economic viability, I have, in California alone through the Cook Alliance, this has led, when I mentioned the 50,000 or so kitchens that were not licensed properly, after it was actually legally cleared, that 50,000 not only did it increased, meaning the number of kitchens that actually wanted the license, because all of a sudden it was legal. It was more people were feeling that they had another way of generating income. And a lot of those, and I have research that shows this, a lot of those communities are those marginalized communities. So stay-at-home mothers, non-speaking and non-English speaking immigrants, women, underrepresented minorities. The pandemic really allowed all of the unemployed chefs and restaurant workers, of which there are, I think, 2.4 million at this point, grandparents, retirees. I mean, I can go on and on. There's members of nonprofit organizations. So again, these are skill sets that people already have. They don't have to go back to school for. They're made available for them to utilize and earn some sort of income. So I can only speak highly for all the research that's come in for numbers that this is economically very beneficial to multiple communities.
Thank you for that. Andre, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I know Councilor Edwards mentioned the nitty-gritty of future working sessions, but I think this is an opportunity, especially with the landlord-tenant relationship, to lean on other nearby cities and towns that currently permit these types of operations to learn more about their process, so that we can pull what works for Boston and tailor that accordingly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Any further questions from my colleagues? Councilor Bach.
Thanks so much, Councilor Flaherty. I just wanted to enter, it's more of a comment, but it's for a follow-up in our working session. My instinct is that the sort of zoning related issues will be most relevant if there is in fact pickup happening at the establishment. And my instinct is that there you're going to have some of the issues the fire department raised and you're more likely, frankly, to have strong neighbor opinion. I think, and so my instinct is like, okay, maybe we have to do that, a zoning thing vis-a-vis making them an actual establishment that somebody can come to as a customer and pick something up at. But on the other hand, I think that if someone is producing something in their kitchen, if we're taking care of all this health issue and the inspection issue and stuff, my instinct is that having that go through the ZBA on a one-by-one basis is not a good use of time. Of administrative time, of regulatory time, because it seems like all the important regulatory pieces we're going to be taken care of in other ways. So I just want to flag for ISD that I think we should really think about that before overburdening the ZBA. And I also just think that to avoid a potential tenant, I think it's one thing to have a conversation with your landlord. It's another thing to feel like you need to acquire a zoning lawyer. So I just want to flag that for further conversation, because to me, those feel like two very different questions depending on whether that pickup's going to happen on the site or not. So thank you, Councillor Flaherty, and thank you to everybody for speaking today.
Very good. And then any last comments from our commissioners or the fire marshal before we close it out with the lead sponsor? Commissioner Dempsey has stepped away. Fire Marshal Tully, any final comments?
Thank you, Council Flaherty. No, I just, I mean, we covered a lot of ground today. I think, Council Edwards said this is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, I guess, where there'll be more discussion to have. It'd be nice to be included, and I think as it moves forward, getting the information out to the future, kitchen operators, I think is going to be imperative. But other than that, thanks for the invite.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Dion Irish, any parting comments?
I want to echo Chief Tully. There's a lot more work to be done, and we need to ensure that everyone is at the table. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and a lot of good points have come up. So look forward to continuing the discussion, because I do think we need to have this discussion and find a path forward and offer this to our residents in a way that addresses all the concerns that were raised today.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Dan Prendergast, any final comment?
Councilor Flaherty, I don't have any additional comment at this time. Thank you.
Very good. Manisha, any final comment?
Thank you very much. No more. Thank you.
Very good. And Andre, any final comments?
Just a thank you to everybody.
Very good. And I see that we still have Chantel Lima is on. If Chantel has any final comment?
No, thank you.
Very good. So over to the lead sponsor and architect, Julie Mejia, if you want to end the hearing with any final comments on your ordinance.
No, thank you. I'm incredibly excited about the possibilities, and I just really want to thank our participants and the commissioners and the fire marshal and everyone who is leaning into the conversation. I think that we have an amazing opportunity, especially since we have already seen this across the state. I think that Boston is well positioned to really look at what we need to do and be super mindful that these times require us to think outside the box and to be innovative and to hold ourselves to that challenge. And so looking forward to the next working session. And I am looking forward to hopefully being able to move this along in this legislative cycle. I don't think that what we're asking and what we're trying to unpack here is going to keep us held hostage for a year or two while folks are continuing to juggle to make their ends meet. So I think we have a responsibility and an opportunity to show what government looks like when we are serious about moving things forward and putting our best foot forward and to ensure that we can expedite this in a timely and efficient, and also being really thoughtful while we go about it. So thank you all for your participation and for bringing great questions and answers to the space.
Thank you, Councilor here. And as indicated by the chair, she wishes to work with the lead sponsor in scheduling a working session. So on behalf of the chair, Councilor Edwards, want to thank the invited panelists, the invited guests, and obviously my colleagues for their participation. And with respect to docket 0216, it's an ordinance. And it is for residential retail kitchens. The Committee on Government Operations is adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you.